Here, Dr. Rhonda Patrick briefly explaining how your age and increased diseases is affected by low vitamin D3 and how it works.
The age, so a 70-year-old makes 4 times less vitamin D in their skin from the sun than their former 20-year-old self. And also latitude, so where you live. But here in the Philippines, it's not much of an issue. But in many parts of the world, people can't even make vitamin D from the sun 5 to 6 months out of the year. Body fat also regulates the bioavailability of vitamin D. So vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and it's stored in fat. But the more fat you have, the less it can be released in the bloodstream to be activated into a hormone, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But why should we care about vitamin D? Well, vitamin D actually regulates the aging process. So these mice right here are the same age. The mouse here on the left has had genetically knocked out its vitamin D receptor. So it cannot respond to vitamin D at all. So it's essentially like vitamin D deficient. But these are the same mice 4 months later. Look at that mouse. I mean, it is rapidly aging. It's lost all its hair, its skin looks awful, its organs are aging. And it's the same age as that mouse there on the right, which is about, I guess they're about 8.5 months old there. Okay, so how do you know if you are getting enough vitamin D? Blood levels of vitamin D, according to the Endocrine Society, what's considered deficient is blood levels less than 20 nanograms per milliliter. What's considered inadequate is less than between 20 and 30 milligrams per liter, and adequate is between 30 and 60 nanograms per milliliter. Why do I say 30 and 60? Well, there's been about 33 meta-analysis studies dating back from 1966 all the way to 2013 that have looked at all-cause mortality, so people dying of cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, respiratory disease, all non-accidental deaths. And people that had blood levels of vitamin D actually between 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter had the lowest all-cause mortality. So they were less likely to die of all these diseases. And in fact, there's also been some other studies that have looked at people that have genetically low levels of vitamin D because of a certain gene polymorphism in a gene that makes them not make enough vitamin D as well. And they also have a much higher all-cause mortality. So as I mentioned, UVB radiation is the primary source of vitamin D. You actually convert something in your skin called 7-dehydrocholesterol into vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 then gets released into the bloodstream, it goes to the liver. In the liver, it gets converted into 25-hydroxy vitamin D. And that's what we measure as a marker for vitamin D levels. But that's not actually the active vitamin D. So 25-hydroxy vitamin D then goes to the kidneys. And in the kidneys, it gets activated into a steroid hormone. So vitamin D is actually a hormone. And this hormone is regulating about 5% of the human genome. So that's a lot of genes here that vitamin D is controlling. It is controlling 5% of the physiological processes going on inside of each and every one of your organs, including the brain.